Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Crime Family. I'm your co host, AJ, and I'm here with my sisters, Stephanie and Katie, like always. And in today's episode, we are going to be talking about the Ruby Franke case. Now, you may know a bit about this case. Was pretty high profile, and it's a pretty strange and pretty crazy case. So this is the um, we're going to walk you through sort of the events of the case, what happened, and kind of like some of the people that were involved, and then we're going to obviously have our own discussion about it. So if you don't know anything about this case, then we'll spend the first little bit just going over the basics. It's not going to be an big, you know, full rundown of every detail. It is going to be just sort of giving you an idea of the case. There's obviously a lot more details that you can find in lots of other documentaries and YouTube videos and TV specials and stuff like that. So this was just what I was able to gather from watching a few like specials and reading a lot about this case. So and I know the two of you, Steph and Kate, you were kind of moderately familiar with this case before we decided to do it for the show. Like you knew about it maybe, but like definitely not the details, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I didn't even recognize the name. I was like, "Oh, I haven't heard of this." And then once you told me what it was about, I was like, "Oh, yeah, I did. I have heard of it, but I definitely didn't know the details."
Yeah, I've actually watched some of her. Like, I used to follow her on Instagram or
Oh,
whatever
really?
platform she was on.
So you knew it
Like,
before
not
all this broke.
like this was like a month before all this came out. Like, it wasn't like years of me watching her. It was just like a month. I happened to see, and I was like, oh, he seems interesting because obviously you don't see behind the scenes. I was like, oh, she has some kind of like decent tips, and some of her videos are funny. But then as soon as this came out, I was like, yeah, no, I deleted her off my thing. I'm like, this is not who I thought she was. But it was yeah, I know, like, I knew her, and then when like I said, when that stuff came out about her, I was like, "Oh, okay. Well then, not the videos I thought these were." So,
Yeah, and yeah, I'll get
that was it.
into to a bit about that. And yeah, like you alluded to, she was a momfluencer, quote unquote, a YouTube mom who had a pretty
I hate that
popular
word.
YouTube channel. I know. Well, I hate them. No, I'm kidding. So they had like a pretty popular YouTube channel. So I'll get into all of that, but it's basically the story of this picture perfect ideal life of this family and really what was going on behind the scenes and sort of what came from that. So I'm just going to get right into it. And this all really starts, or the domino effect sort of starts on August 30th of 2023. So it's not even that long ago, right? Just a year and a half ago or so, or a little under a year and a half ago. And it was on the morning of August 30th, 2023, when in Ivins, Utah, a frail, malnourished 12-year-old boy rang the doorbell of a neighbor's home. And this child appeared very gaunt and had a very desperate look in his eyes, which immediately raised red flags. So the boy explained to the neighbor who opened the door that he had just escaped from a nearby residence. And so the concerned neighbor immediately dialed 911 and he reported what he was seeing. He, quote, the neighbor said, quote, he looks like he's been tied up, end quote, and described things like tape marks that were visible around the boy's legs and wrists. So the child was clearly hungry and thirsty and was asking for food and water. And so officers swiftly respond to the scene, and the boy identified the house that he had fled from. He said it was just a couple of doors down, and the house belonged to a woman named Jodi Hildebrandt. And oddly, this woman that the house belonged to wasn't his mother. He says that his mother, Ruby Franke, lived hours away in another part of Utah. So already that's a little bit strange. So I'm going to play the audio of the 911 video. I'm also going to share my screen. So if you're watching the video version of this podcast, you'll see the screen of the YouTube clip. I mean, it's all audio anyway. There's no like surveillance footage or anything to see, but you will be hearing the audio. I'm just going to play the first few minutes. It is quite a long call. I think it's over 10 minutes, but I'm just going to be playing the first 3 minutes or so of it. So I will play that now.
911, the address of your emergency. Okay, and the phone number you're calling from. Tell me exactly what's happened.
I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here at my front door asking for help. And he's said he just came from a neighbor's house, and we know there's been problems at this neighbor's house. He's emaciated. He's got tape around his legs. He's hungry, and he's thirsty.
Okay. Is your door locked?
No, I'm sitting outside with him on the front patio.
Okay, cool.
And he asked us to call the police.
What's
So
your
he's
name?
very afraid. What's your last name? And he's 12 years old. Yes.
Okay, and can you ask him his date of birth?
Can you tell me your birthday?
Okay, and are the neighbors out of their home, or is anybody looking for them that you can see?
No. Our homes are far enough away. I'm not sure. How did you get out of the house?
Porch.
He says you just left through the porch at the neighbor's house. Her name is Jodi Hildebrandt, and she lives 2 doors up the street. Yeah, out here in Cayenne, the houses are far apart, so he walked just under a block to get to our house. He rang my doorbell and asked me to call the police.
Does he seem to be under the influence of drugs or alcohol?
I don't think so, but he's very thirsty, and
Need an ambulance?
I don't think he needs an ambulance. I'll let the cops decide that, but his ankles are taped up, and he won't tell us why.
Okay.
But he has duct taped around each ankle. Yeah, there's sores around them. I think the good chance he's been. Oh, and he has them around his ankles. I mean his wrists as well. Okay, this boy has been. He needs. This kid has obviously been. I think he's been detained. He's obviously covered in wounds.
So that was just the first 3 minutes of it. Obviously, it goes on for several more minutes, but that gives you the gist of it. So overall, just a hard 911 call to listen to. Obviously, the neighbor is very emotional on the phone, and so clear that it's a very serious situation, and that this child took the chance to escape and had been enduring some type of abuse. So that was what's kind of set everything in motion for what's going to happen next. And so the police were right on it. Actually, I guess I would ask you what you guys think of that 911 call, or any thoughts about it.
Well, this is like my 4th time hearing that, because I've watched quite a bit of video on it. And at first, like, the neighbor seemed like really calm at first, but then you can tell, like, as he's like looking more at the boy, you can tell that he's seeing like something awful happen to him. And you don't really hear, like, the boy's not really saying much. I'm assuming they're just cutting his voice out, but either that or he's just very scared and very sick and doesn't know what else to do. But like, good for him for escaping and going to the nearest house. Because if you watch a video of the 911 call, like the actual like footage, the houses are like, they're in a desert. The houses are like super far apart. So for him to be able to like walk that far and not like collapse from the heat or whatever, because he's so like starved and like dehydrated, like he kept going just to get help. Like, that shows like so much courage for that little boy. And I feel so bad for him. But as we get into this whole story, you'll know more about it. But it was just like a very like eye-opening 911 call that I saw, and I watched the footage too, so it was just crazy.
Yeah, so, like, for me, when I first listened to this, or, like, try to remember this story, I don't even know if it was this one, but, like, I was just thinking that it was, like, a YouTube channel, and, like, the kids were kind of just forced to be a part of this, like, channel when they really weren't into it, and it was kind of like, you have to perform for the camera, or and they were kind of abused that way. And then I didn't even really realize, like, the extent that it had gotten, and so the 911 call was actually a surprise to me because I didn't realize how bad it actually was. Um, but yeah, like Steph was saying, you can hear how, like, the neighbors just trying to, like, describe the situation, then he kind of, like, almost, like, he can hear him, like, break his voice because he's getting like, upset about what he's seeing, so you can just, like, imagine what is going on. Like, you can just look what he's seeing, how bad this kid looks, so, yeah, it's super sad, when you think about what must be going on.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I
just the
mean,
sorry, just the fact that it's not his mother's house, it's Jodi Hildebrandt's house. And you'll know about her more as we get into this case, but, like, the mother wasn't even it's not the mo it's like he was captive in this house that's not even his family house. So that's
Yeah.
also strange at the same time too.
Yeah, and the fact that the neighbor says that it looks like he's been, like, detained, but he won't say why he has tape around his wrists and ankles, like, obviously the kid is scared to, like, even really talk about what's going on, so you can tell that it wasn't just, like, something has been going on for a while for this kid to be, scared to, like, say what's happening, so, I mean, it's super brave that he was actually able to, like, get out and run, but that he's, like, still hesitant to, like, talk about what's happening, so, yeah, you can just the level of, like, abuse that's going on. It's sad.
It kinda reminds me of the turban case that we did, like, in the very beginning,
Yeah,
how
that's what I was
the
thinking
that
of
girl
too.
just like, the girl ran away and she was trying to tell the cops, but it's like, he was more educated on what to do, but she didn't really understand what, like, injuries meant or, like, anything like that. They're kinda similar. How, like, these kids escaped to go get help, and in the end, they get the help they need, and the other people are reprimanded for what they did.
yeah, yeah, I thought of the Turpin case too right away. I also thought of the Hart family. We did a episode on the Hart family as well, which was similar in terms of like the influencer mom kind of vibe. So yeah, I mean, my first thought too is I don't even know if this is what the neighbor was thinking or what, because obviously this, like, the child said that it was Jodi Hildebrandt's house, but that his mother was far away in another part of Utah. So I was thinking of, like, is this some sort of abduction situation? Like, this person is being held captive at a house that's not his mother's house. So, like, that's what I would think of right away. Like, oh, this kid's been abducted, and the abductor is in that couple houses over. Like, that's your first thought. But as we'll get into it, it's not really that type of situation. Um, it's clear that Jodi Hildebrandt and the boy's mother were quite close, and so it wasn't really like an abduction situation in that way. But yeah, so the police obviously took it very seriously when they got the 911 call. So the police arrive at the scene. They go to Jodi Hildebrandt's residence, and when they get inside the home, they discover a second child sitting silently on the floor of a closet. And there is some police body cam footage of this. I'm not going to show that, but we can link it in the show notes. So I'm not going to show you that video, but you can see the police going in through the house, and they find this child sitting on the floor of the closet. This child is equally emaciated, visibly traumatized, and displays the same signs of prolonged neglect and abuse as the boy who had escaped earlier. So neither child really spoke much. I mean, the boy spoke enough to give the neighbor the gist of what was happening, but this other child didn't really say much at all, just sat on the floor silent and terrified to speak to even the police. So the authorities immediately arrested Jodi Hildebrandt, and shortly after, they arrested the children's mother, Ruby Franke. So both women were taken into custody, and they were eventually charged with 6 counts of felony child abuse. Um, they found things in the house like rope, duct tape, and handcuffs inside the residence. So they were charged with 6 counts of child or felony child abuse because there were 6 children. So I think in this immediate scene, it was the boy who escaped and then this other child, but there were 6 children total that were, victims of this that was eventually discovered, and so they were charged with those 6 counts of felony child abuse. So as Stephanie sort of alluded to earlier, and we spoke about, Ruby Franke, the children's mother, wasn't just a normal everyday person. She was a prominent quote in quotes Momfluencer, whose popular YouTube channel called 8 Passengers actually had about 2.5 million subscribers at its peak. So Ruby was, so she wasn't, totally unknown. Not saying that she was like a celebrity or an A-list celebrity at all, but within the influencer or the YouTube influencer world, she was pretty prominent. So in the videos on the 8 Passengers YouTube channel, Ruby is shown portraying this image of a cheerful, devoted Mormon mother, and she documents the daily lives of her and her 6 children, and also her husband Kevin. So there's 8 of them in total, given hence the name 8 Passengers. So yet beneath this public persona that she was portraying to the world, there really was a darker version of her and a darker version of the reality that was happening in the home. So as investigators dived a little bit deeper into this case, they discovered a disturbing partnership between Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt, which came to light. So Jodi Hildebrandt, she is a self-proclaimed life coach, and she was actually a licensed counselor, and she had founded a controversial coaching business called Connections. And this program preached a rigid and often punitive approach to personal accountability. And it actually gained quite a following despite some of its harsh methods. And so Ruby had aligned herself closely with Jodi, and the two of them joined forces in what appeared to be a troubling collaboration that began to blur the lines between mentorship and control. So that was something that the police really kind of honed in on, was this Connections program and how it came to be and sort of what some of the ideologies or the teachings of it were. So that does come into the case a little bit later. But before I get a little bit more into that, I do want to kind of talk a little bit about Jodi Hildebrandt and a little bit of her history, because obviously before she was arrested in 2023, she did have quite a history, and this definitely wasn't the first time that she was known to be abusive to children. So just to give a little bit more context into Jodi, I want to just talk a little bit about that. So there is an ABC Nightline special on this case that's actually really good, and we'll link it in the show notes. And it features a compelling interview with Jessie Hildebrandt, who is the estranged 30-year-old niece of Jodi. So Jessie offers a detailed and disturbing account of growing up in a household that was dominated by manipulation, fear, and emotional abuse. So Jessie's story paints Jodi as a figure who had long wielded an authoritarian and harmful approach to parenting. So this was an approach that appears to have extended to the children of Ruby Franke eventually. So Jessie says that their childhood was pretty normal and mostly happy. However, during adolescence, as Jessie began to rebel, their parents decided that living with Aunt Jodi might provide discipline and structure. So kind of a case of the parents just didn't want to deal with her or couldn't deal with her, so thought that to go live with Aunt Jodi. And Jessie was initially hesitant, but chose to trust Jodi because Jodi actually had a reputation as one of the most highly recommended counselors within the Mormon church. So Jodi was also part of the Mormon religion. And Jodi had this position as a counselor for well over a decade. I think it was over 15 years. And it appears as though Jodi was so highly regarded that if there was ever someone in the church who was struggling with something or needed some counseling, that Jodi was always one of the most, one of the go-tos that the church would recommend for those people. So Jodi had a pretty good reputation, and she was, professional and was sort of seen as this pretty well-known figure within the Mormon church, or at least in this community. So Jessie thought, Aunt Jodi, she don't really want to go live there, but she's highly regarded. She's a counselor, so this could be something that I'll be open to. But upon arriving at Jodi's home, Jessie quickly realized that the outward image of a trusted and respected professional concealed a much darker reality. So the abuse began almost immediately and escalated over time. So Jessie recounts stories of being forced to sleep outside in the snow and being duct taped in the home in order to prevent communication with anyone else outside the household. And the justification for the duct tape, Jessie explains, is that Jodi said it served as a reminder that Jessie was a liar. Because according to Jodi, everything that Jessie said was just a straight up lie. So Jesse was also not enrolled in school because this was one of Jodi's bizarre counseling strategies. And Jodi would also tape their mouth shut and force Jesse to wear the same clothes for weeks at a time. So it was just that type of cruelness and abuse. So in 2010, after enduring this abuse, Jesse finally filed a report with authorities. And initially, the police removed Jesse from Jodi's care, and Jesse was placed in a teen safe home. However, Jesse was returned to Jodi after only 1 day, and this was a decision that intensified the abuse. So probably as a punishment for even going to authorities, Jodi probably turned it up a notch in terms of the abuse. So Jesse went back living with Jodi and endured more abuse for another period of time, I think close to a year. And then it was a year later, there was this opportunity that presented itself for a possible escape because Jodi brought Jesse to work for the day. And I guess my sense is that Jesse never really left the house that much, obviously saying that Jodi would duct tape, to prevent any communication. So Jodi was obviously very hesitant to have Jesse leave. So when she did bring Jesse to work for this day, Jesse saw it as, one of a great opportunity for an escape. So sensing that this might be the only chance, Jesse ran away and never returned. So this escape marked the end of Jesse's ordeal with Jodi. And it was following this period at some point that Jodi went on to partner with Ruby Franke to create that controversial Connections coaching program, which again promoted that rigid and punitive practices under the guise of life coaching. And Ruby, a once celebrated momfluencer on the YouTube channel 8 Passengers, soon began implementing similar methods on her own children. So that's a little bit about Jodi and how obviously she has a history of doing this to her own niece. So now that it's Ruby's children. So Ruby was, I guess, I don't know, infatuated with Jodi, or they had a friendship, and they formed this bond through this Connections program. And Ruby allowed Jodi to implement some of these things on her own children, or maybe Ruby also did it herself too towards her children. So pretty crazy that you would think. And obviously, we don't know. I don't really know if Ruby was aware of all of that. Probably not. But also wouldn't really matter because she can see Jodi doing that to her own children, or allowing her to do it. So it wouldn't necessarily matter her history or that she's done it before. But yeah. So that's a little bit about Jodi Hildebrandt. And so I'm gonna go into a little bit about Ruby Franke and her family, and to give you like a little bit of detail about her life. So the Salt Lake City Tribune report. So a lot of this stuff is from this report from the Salt Lake City Tribune, but they say that Ruby Franke and her husband Kevin first moved into their Springville, Utah home in January of 2020, and they talked to a neighbor that lived next door to Ruby since that time. And the neighbor says that initially Ruby's children interacted with the local church community and befriended other kids in the area. But over the years, the children were eventually pulled out of school. And after their father, Kevin, moved out of the home around August 2022, the neighbor observed that Ruby's 4 youngest children were repeatedly left home alone. The oldest child, Sherry, she's a student at Brigham Young University, and Sherry said in an April 2023 podcast that she cut ties with her family in 2022 after her mother began working with Hildebrandt on Connections. So 2022 was when Ruby kind of went all in with this Connections thing with Jodi, but she had been kind of increasingly sort of neglecting her children, I guess you could say, from really 2020 onwards. But even before that, as I'll get into. So subscribers, what's interesting too is that subscribers of the 8 Passengers YouTube channel really became some of the first that were raising concerns about the children's treatment, because they pointed out some troubling patterns in the family dynamics that were depicted in the videos. So there's actually one clip that they show in the Nightline special, and Ruby's son talks about how he's been forced to sleep on a beanbag chair for 7 months after his bedroom was taken away as a punishment. And in the video, Ruby seems unbothered. She's laughing about it, and she says, quote, "I don't think our viewers know that," end quote. And then there's another video which shows Ruby explaining to viewers that she's refused to bring her daughter lunch at school when her daughter forgot to bring it. So there's kind of this like cruelty, and she sort of seems oblivious to it. Like she's talking openly about it in this YouTube channel and it's sort of, as the years go on, it's like becoming more and more obvious that these are not just like unorthodox methods of child rearing. It's like crossing that line into abuse. So it was really the
Yeah,
followers
and
of that YouTube
she, like,
channel.
even says, like, multiple times that, like, "Oh, I, like, withhold food as, like, a punishment." She's like, "I don't even let my kids eat breakfast until they do all their chores," and it's just like a nonchalant thing, like, that's just how it works in our house, like, "You're not gonna eat if you don't do what I say." So, yeah, it's just kind of how where her, like, mind was with this, where it's just like, "Yeah, you're not gonna eat unless you listen," which is, like, not normal at all, so
Like, what I don't understand, like, when the husband left, like, he didn't, like, try to get the kids? Like, he didn't like, did he not see what was going on? Like, did he not try to, like, get custody of the kids so they could go live with him and not have to live with her? Like, I don't understand, like, why he just didn't really try to
Yeah,
do
well, I
that
mean,
type
I'll
of
get
stuff.
that. I get into that a little bit.
Oh, okay. But, yeah, going back to what Katie said about, like, those 2 videos AJ I mean, so not Katie said, but AJ said those 2 videos that you were talking about, like, the room and the lunch, those are the 2 videos that I saw, like, way back before I, like, figured out who she was, and I was thinking to myself, like, "How can you not bring your kid lunch to school? Like, she's gonna be starving. Like, kids need to eat." And I was just thinking, like,
teach your daughter responsibility. It's like, "You forgot your
yeah,
lunch, well,
like
now you're just not gonna eat." Like, she's 6.
that's what I'm thinking because I'm thinking of, like, my like, Olivia, like, my own daughter, she's gonna be 6, and, like, if she forgot her lunch, I would, like, make sure that somebody brought her lunch to her, or, like, I don't know, she didn't have a lunch for some random reason, and I wasn't gonna be, "Oh, she forgot her lunch, that's her fault, like, too bad."
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and I
no,
also feel
kids
like
need to eat.
yeah, and putting that responsibility on a 6-year-old to, like, make and pack your own lunch every day, I feel like that's a lot. Like, I don't even wanna get up and make my own lunch. I feel like sometimes I forget my lunch, you know what I mean? So I just, like yeah, it's a lot for kids to have to take on that responsibility.
Yeah, and, like, in the video of, like, where she's talking to the son about losing his room privilege or whatever it was, like, you could see the smile on her face, but you could also see, like, he just looks like there's no emotion like, in his body language. He just looks like, she thinks it's hilarious, but he thinks it's, like, not right. You can
Yeah,
tell,
and
like, the 2 different.
I know, and also in that video, they start talking about something else, and he's, like, kind of, like, giggling about it. She's laughing the whole time, and then she's like, "Oh, you think that's funny?" She's like, "Well, if it's funny, then maybe, we'll have to do it again." And then he just, like, completely is just like, "Oh, no, it wasn't funny." And it's just like, "Well, you think it's hilarious for one thing." And then as soon as he kinda thinks it's kinda funny, well, she's like, "Oh, well, I guess it wasn't serious enough," kinda thing. So it's just, like, this control that she needs to have over them, which is, like, obvious even in that one video.
Yeah, and clearly she has no real shame or embarrassment about it because she's putting this out into the world. So these aren't just stories that we're hearing secondhand. Someone saying this happened. There's video evidence of it where she's putting this out into the world as something that she's obviously proud of, or that she's showcasing at least, right? So pretty terrifying. And like I said, it was the subscribers of the channel that grew increasingly concerned about the behavior because they were seeing the weekly videos or whatever, how often the videos were coming, but they were seeing this pattern. And I'm sure a lot of the comments in the comment section were like kind of saying this is a red flag or that something was kind of off there. So there was sort of this groundswell of support, or not support, but of like this groundswell of people being concerned about the family and about Ruby specifically and how she was treating the kids. And so Ruby's husband, Kevin, he occasionally appeared in the videos. He also drew scrutiny from viewers for his treatment of the children as well, because he would kind of say some offhand comments as well. Not as bad as Ruby, but he was obviously there up until 2022. He was in the home. So you can't really live in the home and be on someone's YouTube channel regularly and not know what's happening. But so over time, passengers of 8 followers increasingly expressed concern about the unorthodox and borderline abusive behaviors portrayed on the channel. In fact, in 2020, there was an online petition that was created by, I think it was a subscriber of the channel, that was urging Child Protective Services to make a visit to Ruby's home. And this petition gained nearly 250 signatures. And records also indicate that police did make several trips to Ruby's home from 2017 to 2020 for countless reasons, including, quote, juvenile problems, end quote, and several welfare checks in 2022. Ruby eventually did delete the YouTube channel in 2022, probably likely due to the increasing number of reports that were filed against her from her subscribers. And it was after the channel's deletion that she really began working with Jodi on connections. So I'm sure she probably either A, thought, okay, this is going to be incriminating evidence if something leads to this. Like there had been reports filed already, and there had been several welfare checks and things like that, or several visits to the home. So she probably thought, like, okay, I'm going to be done with this channel. And then she, after the channel was done, she needed to make some money somehow. So she began or worked with Jodi on this connections program. And like I said, in 2022, when she did that, that was when her oldest daughter, Sherry, sort of distanced herself from her whole family. She was at Brigham Young University, and she kind of just cut ties with them because she had obviously endured things, and just that was her own way of coping with it, was just getting that distance. And so the Salt Lake Tribune reports, quote, so this next couple paragraphs is quoted directly from the report, or from the article. So, quote, after that response, meaning after, the increasing level of visits and reports and complaints, the Franke's home's blinds were always closed, and what appeared to be paper was placed over the windows, the neighbor said. The neighbor had separately spoken with the DCFS, so the Department of Children and Family Services, twice in 2022 about Franke's children, because she said she was concerned that they were being left alone for long periods of time, and she did not know if they had access to food and care. I was looking for, what are the rules here? That was the direct quote from the neighbor. So in the first call, an agency staffer that she spoke with cited Utah's landmark free-range parenting law. She said, Utah in 2018 became the first state in the country to pass a free-range parenting law, which changed the state's definition of child neglect. So the legislation added a section to state code explaining that a child, quote, whose basic needs are met and who is of sufficient age and maturity, end quote, can engage in independent activities without it being considered child neglect, such as walking, running, or biking to and from school, or being home alone. So I guess it just loosened what is considered child abuse. So I guess children can be left alone by themselves for a certain amount of time, and it's not going to be against any law, as long as they're of sufficient age and maturity. But I don't know if the law states what that is. That's really subjective. Children have different levels of maturity. It doesn't mean so. How do you really define that anyway? So it's really loose law. And there was a search warrant of the home that was escalated to a judge, but the judge never granted it. And because of that, there could be no formal search done. And the ABC special, the Nightline special, said that CPS was under investigation in Utah due to their handling of this case, because they had failed to conduct sufficient welfare checks that could have rescued the children from this abuse many times in the year before 2023. So Ruby's husband, Kevin, he explained through his lawyer that the early reports, so those reports of, when the police would go to the house for the juvenile problems, which was the quote, said that they were nothing serious and that it was just a result of online harassment from trolls and haters of their YouTube channel. So he probably thought, oh, the YouTube people, the internet trolls are just sending the police to our home because either they don't like us, they don't like the channel, so they're just acting maliciously to get the police here. So he sort of chalked it up to that was just the behavior of the trolls. And so obviously it was out of concern for the children. So these weren't just internet trolls. They were legitimate subscribers of the channel who were alerting authorities that something was not right. Jessie, so going back to Jodi's niece, Jessie says that while the public is mostly focused on Ruby's role in it, because it is Ruby's children and it was her YouTube channel that was showcasing this behavior to the world, Jessie says that all of the strategies and parenting styles comes directly from Jodi. So while Ruby's definitely guilty because she allowed it to occur in her home and she obviously taken part in it and she's laughing about it in those videos, it was Jodi that was no doubt the ringleader, according to Jessie anyway, in this interview. So Jodi has since given up her counseling license, and Ruby's children, or at the time of the Nightline special, which was in October of 2023, Ruby's children were in the care of the state, but their father, Kevin, was trying to win them back at the time of the special. So Kevin Franke, I think, was initially considered a suspect during this early investigation, right after the arrests, because, like I said, he was in the YouTube videos. He lived in the home. He did leave in 2022. He and Ruby had separated. So he says that from 2022 all the way to 2023, so about a year, he had no contact really with Ruby or really with the kids. He was providing financial support, but he wasn't in contact with them. But he still was up until 2022 when all of these, complaints are happening and the police are going to the house and DCFS is involved. So all of those times he was in the house. So he was sort of roped into it and was considered a suspect early on, but he said that, from 2022 on, he had no really involvement or knowledge about the abuse of the children until the arrests were made. So in February of 2024, so of course they get arrested, they go through all of the proceedings. Ruby Franke was given 4 consecutive sentences that each were between 1 and 15 years in prison. So technically, if she were to serve only 1 year on all 4 sentences, then she could serve a minimum of only 4 years, or she could spend a maximum of 60 years in prison if she were to get 15 years on each one. However, there is a Utah law that states that in the case of consecutive sentences, no more than 30 years can be served. So that means that Ruby could serve a minimum of 4 to a maximum of 30. So Jodi Hildebrandt received the same sentence. And the reason that they only had four sentences when they were initially charged with the 6 felonies of child abuse, which was 1 for each child, is that 2 of these were removed during the plea deal negotiations. So Ruby eventually testified against Jodi in the proceedings and therefore had 2 counts removed and could only receive sentences for 4 of the felony counts. So there were also allegations that Ruby and Hildebrandt had a sexual relationship for some time. That's not confirmed. There were just a lot of people who think that Jodi and Ruby were like very close and it wasn't just this like friendship relationship between them. And we don't really know the reasons why Kevin and Ruby separated in 2022. I guess the marriage just fell apart. But it was really from 2022 to 2023, that year, right before the arrests, was when Ruby and Jodi were really close because they were working on the Connections program together. So
Well, some of the
go
things
ahead.
that I listened to said that he left because it was under like Jodi's advice as a counselor for their relationship that he had to leave and like get some distance from them. So it was like her doing to remove him as well. That was like part of
Yeah,
it. So
that's what one of the things that I read and one things that I interviewed that I watched was that she kind of like told him to leave because it was good for the marriage. So that's why he left.
So she probably had ulterior motives, like to get Kevin out of
I
there.
just want can we go back to this Connections junk thing? Because to me it sounds like a cult.
I was just gonna say cult. Yeah, it's like a cult in the
It's
making.
like in the Mormon church. Like we hear it all the time. It's like I don't understand these stupid programs that people make up that are like supposed to help you, but yet like it's not helping you at all. Like whose counselor moves into their house? Nobody does that. Like it doesn't make any sense to me. Like when I first heard this about this Connections thing, the first thing came to my mind was a cult. I'm like, there's no way that people like think this
Yeah,
is
it's
real.
been like referenced as a cult, and people are saying that like Ruby is really the only follower that she had at the time. It's like, can it still be a cult? There's only 2 people, but I feel like if it was allowed to go on, then they probably could have roped more people in, and it could have been like a bigger cult. Um, One of the things that I find interesting is that like there's one of the videos with Ruby. She's saying the reason why she like shut down her YouTube channel was because she wanted it wasn't fair to the kids. She would like wanted to give them more attention. She said like it was kind of neglectful to the kids, this YouTube channel, because she wasn't really there for her kids because she was always doing this YouTube channel. And so it's just interesting that's what she says was the reason why she shut it down, was to be fair to the kids and kind of give them more attention and be there for them more, which is so ironic because it's like the exact opposite happened after she shut it down. So it's just kind of crazy, like way her thinking. Like it's just like she was, I don't know. It's like she was completely kind of brainwashed because she knew that this YouTube channel wasn't really good for the kids. This is what she says anyway. Because there's even one video where she's like talking and like her kid's only 13 and she's like, "Oh, well, like, are you dating? Like, are you dating anybody?" And it's like the first time she's like, "Excuse, we never really talked about this before." And like on camera, like that must be, first of all, it's like mortifying just for you and your mom to like talk about that at that age. And then for her to have it like on YouTube for like 2.5 million viewers is like that poor kid, like, yeah, stuff like that. I think she was kind of realizing that maybe this isn't the healthiest thing for them, but then the road she goes after that is, like, even worse. So, I don't know if she's just saying that or if she actually felt it. It's kinda crazy.
Yeah, and I don't buy that that's the reason she deleted her YouTube account. Like, I think that's all BS because I don't really think she even cared about her children, or at least not in the typical sense. I don't know. She seems kind of crazy, but I think it's probably obvious because by 2022, when she shut it down, they had multiple visits from the police. Like, a part of her realized, okay, this is not a good thing. Like, people are on to me, people are calling the police, and like eventually one of these calls or visits is going to lead to something bigger. So she probably thought like to just get rid of that. So, and also like maybe she thought this is, like I said before, it's incriminating evidence. If anything were to come of it and this were to blow up and I am arrested or whatever, like, but I don't know, maybe not. Maybe that's just what I'm thinking, but maybe she wasn't even aware that she was doing anything wrong. That's where I can't tell. I'm like, does someone like this know that they're doing something wrong, or if they're just genuinely brainwashed and they think that they're doing well by or right by their kids and are just doing this? Yes, it's a little bit unorthodox or it's a little bit strange, but maybe she genuinely didn't think that she was doing anything illegal, so therefore maybe she didn't have it in her mind of this was evidence or whatever.
Like,
But
It's
I'm
hard,
kind
like,
yeah, like, I'm kind of sorry, like, I'm, like, kinda wondering if, like, she was kinda, like, under the manipulation of Jodi, because we know Jodi's past, if she can be very manipulative and, like, how she treated her niece. So I feel like maybe she's, under her influence and, like, she's afraid to, like, not do what Jodi is telling her to do because she's afraid of what happened to her. Do you
no,
know what I mean? Like, it's
yeah.
or she knows about it, and she's just going along because she likes it, and likes the attention and whatever.
Oh,
I don't
she's
know,
for
I can't
sure
tell.
under Jodi's manipulation, but I feel like she could still think for herself, and if she thinks that having, like, a YouTube video and, like, a video in her kids' faces all the time isn't good for them, why is, like, not giving them enough food better? Like, so it's just, like, this warped something's going on, and, yeah, I feel like it's definitely has to do with Jodi, some of it, but I don't think she was scared of Jodi. I think, like, she just got into this thing where, when they start talking, like, you see this all the time, like, we see other, like, cases where, like, that becomes their whole life is, like, this program that they're trying to get out there, and, like, they're teaching, and, like, this is, the parenting style, and, like, they go all in, and, like, that's, like, their entire life, and that's kind of what happened to her, and I feel like she's totally believing what Jodi is telling her, and she's, like, all in at this point. So I don't think she was scared of Jodi. I felt like she was just, like, her mind just went somewhere where she just wasn't thinking properly. Or she just, I don't know,
yeah,
because, like, I don't think you go from, like, you don't go from, like, this mother that has these kids and, like, they at the beginning of this YouTube channel and stuff that seems like they were perfectly fine, right? And then as it goes on, that's when she's just like, "I'm just gonna, like, not feed my kids if they don't do stuff." So, it's escalated for sure, but because of
yeah.
Jodi was a huge factor.
Well, it's weird that it's like, oh, in 2022 now all of a sudden, oh, the YouTube channel's not good for my kids, but for the years leading up to that, it's fine. I don't know. It's just like,
Yeah. And well, she made millions from that YouTube channel, so that was, like, a huge decision to, like, shut it down, right? Because I mean, she became very wealthy because of this, so that decision to, like, cut off 2.5 million viewers and all the money she's getting from that, like, obviously, she had to be, like, all in on this thing with Jodi, I feel. Like, there was no, like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? At that point, to, like, get rid of that, like, there had to be something huge going on.
yeah, that's true. And like, yeah, that is a big significant decision. It's not like she chose to shut down a YouTube channel that had like 2 subscribers or something. Like, she was, like I said, 2.5 million subscribers is a lot of people. Not a lot, not a lot. That's probably in like top like 5% of YouTubers or whatever, or the top whatever. So it is significant. So yeah, it is a big decision. But I feel like it happened very quickly with Jodi. Like, from the time that she met Jodi, and then all of a sudden now she's like going down this thing. I don't know. It just seems very obviously Jodi. I think we can agree is probably the, like you said, the ringleader, or the one who obviously introduced all of these things to Ruby, because obviously we see that Jodi has this history of doing this with her own niece, and I just also wonder too how many people that she counseled before this. Did she maybe it wasn't as intense, but like I said, for like 10, 15 years, she was highly regarded in her community as like the go-to counselor for people who are having various issues. So who knows? You don't really just make that drastic turn to all of these
Yeah.
unorthodox and like really
Yeah.
punitive things. Like it's all about like you have to take personal responsibility. So you have to like there's all these punishments in order to like learn. I don't know. I didn't really go too much into connections and like the teachings because it's cringe. So I didn't really know. But it's something like it's very punitive based. It's very like punishment. It's all about taking accountability for your own actions. And, you know,
Yeah,
took
yeah,
them a while
they
to.
in some of these podcasts I listen to, they kind of talk to one of the guys that was under her control, basically. He just said he, like, ruined her life, like, he became just, like, you know, disconnected. That's what they do, like, they disconnect you from your family, and his marriage was over because of it, and he felt like he was the problem and, like, blame everything on you, like, that kinda thing, and so kind of what, like, her niece Jessie was saying, like, this guy kinda did the same thing to him. Like, he knew something was wrong, like, he was saying that he was the problem, he had all these addictions, but he wasn't allowed to go talk to anyone else about it, and she made sure that, like, he's still paying her, like, thousands of dollars a month and wouldn't let him really go to anybody else for help. So, anyway, just that kinda thing. Um, and also, it was like she was, like, an actual counselor, like, she had the credentials, but I was listening to one thing where I think she lost her license to be a counselor, and that's when she kind of became this life coach because, like, anyone could be a life coach. It's not like a regulated field. So, like, us three are life coaches. You know what I mean? Like, you could just be like, I'm a life coach, and you are. So, that's kind of like where it went after that. And then, yeah, so Ruby was a life coach because she said she was. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always skeptical of life coaching in general. I think it's like a cesspool of scammers, like a petri dish of scammers. I think that's,
Not all.
I just,
I know some people that are like life coaches and like they're not like I don't think they're scammers. There are some, like, actual, like, good life principles that they can, like they talk about, like, how to have good habits and how to stay healthy and get real connections with people. I feel like that stuff is still it's fine. And
I
you're not,
mean,
like, making millions
Just
from
look at
it.
your face, AJ. Like,
but
I don't believe
I
that.
just feel to me, it's always like, what makes someone an expert in life? Like, how is someone an authority of life? Like, I don't know. I feel like obviously it's very subjective. And yes, there's probably some that are really good at like, they have good advice and they're just really smart and they like have good, I don't know, they're just, you can able to connect with them in that way. I don't know. I just feel like to me, it's very easily to scam people in that, and people are willing. If someone's seeking out a life coach, they're obviously someone who has a lot of issues, or not even a lot of issues, just some. They have some issues, some help. They need some help, and they're very susceptible to. And also, if you hide behind credentials, like if Jodi was a life coach, but she also had credentials as a counselor, it's like, well, this is a professional counselor. Not everyone goes through the process to become a professional with all these with these qualifications. So if you hide behind that and people see that, it's like, well, she must be onto something because she's a professional counselor. Like she's smart. So I think that combination of the two of her
Yeah,
being
especially
this
when you're, like,
counselor.
highly regarded and, like, people are recommending this person. You have to be like, "Oh, there must be something that she's doing that's working and that people feel is good."
Hmm.
But then, yeah, and then she can, like, turn at any point, and then that's not what people are recommending, what she's doing now, but nobody knows that she's switched kinda thing, right? She could have been legit, and now she's, like, crazy, but people are still recommending her because she used to be legit, so, yeah,
Yeah.
it's scary.
It's so, and it's Steph alluded to it before, but it didn't come up in the stuff I watched, or the articles I read, but you said Jodi moved in with Ruby, or Ruby moved in with Jodi, or one or the other. They moved in with each other.
Jodi moved in with Ruby because Ruby wanted her to have, like, her by her side so she could help her with her kids. And, like, and then that's when her husband moved out.
But then, like, the
It wasn't
kids,
like
like, at the very
her
beginning when
2
they.
kids lived with Jodi, I thought, though, like, in Jodi's
Yeah.
house. But did Ruby live there
It
too?
wasn't all of the kids.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that
don't
was the
know.
thing that I couldn't, because like, I saw on the ABC, on the ABC special, they mentioned that the kids, like, those 2 kids that the police found that day of the arrest it was Jodi's house, but there were 6 kids altogether, but there was only 2 there, but Ruby
Yeah, and then they
wasn't
went
there.
no,
Ruby
but then
lived
they
hours
went
away.
to yeah, then they went to Ruby's house looking for no, then they went to Ruby's friend's house, Pam, her name is. to look for the other kids, and they found the 2 older ones that she had told Ruby asked, like, that day if she could drop them off because she had to go away. Well, she was going away.
Yeah, she had a family emergency, so can you take the 2 older
Yeah.
kids kinda thing.
And then those kids were cleaning her friend's house
But
because
obviously Ruby didn't live with Jodi at the time of the arrest then, because they said that the child said that their mother lived hours away.
Yeah, well, and one of the things I watched, she did move in with them, but I don't know if she's like stayed there for very long. It was like right after they met in Connection. She's like moved into the house. That's what I watched and read. So whether it was a long-term thing or not, obviously not. But one of the things also is the kid that was in the house or in that went to the police or to the neighbor's house. I think it was him or it was the sister that said like they lived in the same house but they haven't seen each other in like a month. And
Yeah,
have
the
you ever
kids.
did you look at the house at
Yeah.
Jodi? It's like a compound. It was
Yeah, it was
like
huge.
rooms and just like within in bathrooms, and then the bathrooms there was another rooms, and it was just like all this like empty space. Had like no furniture really in it. It was like very weird. But yeah. But yeah,
Yeah,
the pit
what
like
I think, like,
the kids
Jodi
that
moved into the like, Ruby's house for a bit, like, just say she stayed there for a bit, but she also had her own house too, so I don't know, it's just weird.
Yeah, just a very weird connection.
Yeah,
That's
that was
that's
probably, like, part of Jodi's, like, whole manipulation was to be, like, in the house so she could, like, control their every move, basically, and I think her husband was still there, like, Ruby's husband still lived there, and then she manipulated her way so that he was even gone from the house, so it was just her and Ruby with the kids, so kinda crazy. It's crazy that
Yes.
someone and, like, another thing that was interesting of this podcast, it was, like, when you listen to Jodi's, like, her YouTube channel, she was kind of very much, like, almost I don't know, like, the opposite of someone that you could manipulate because she was very much, "This is, like, how I'm gonna raise my kids, and I feel like you're not gonna tell me otherwise, and this is what I do, and if you don't like it, then y that's too bad for you." So she was very much, like, stood up for what she believed in, and so for someone to come in like Jodi and completely, like, manipulate her, it's kind of crazy that she allowed someone to do that because she was almost, like, very much the kind of person that would push back. You know what I mean? And then I
yeah, but
guess
you
if she,
also
like,
feel like
believed what Jodi was saying, then she would go all in, but I don't know. I don't know. It's weird.
if you look at if you look at them in the like in the courtroom when they're like with talking to the judge or who whatever, like Jody saying like I love those kids, like I treat them like they were my own, like I would never hurt them and blah blah blah. And Frankie was just like no emotion whatsoever. She had like no sense of like what she did was wrong. It was just like blank cold face. Like two
Well, she
opposite
did.
people.
Yeah, well, I mean, there were clips from her in the courthouse where she's, like, taking accountability, and she's, like, apologizing to her kids and everything like that, so I think it depends on which clip you watch, I don't know. But
I guess,
part of
yeah.
her part of her, like, plea deal, I'm sure she had to take accountability. I mean, their whole Connections program was about taking accountability and, like, punishment and taking accountability for your actions or whatever, so funny that they weren't really jumping at the opportunity to take accountability for their own actions until then until they realized probably that they could get a plea deal out of it if they did. So, um, but yeah, so there is actually in January 2025, so literally just last month, there were some new lawsuits that were filed claiming that Jodi and Ruby's program Connections was a racketeering fraud operation. So reports claim that, quote, the two women were engaged in a racketeering enterprise by advertising and selling fraudulent services and encouraging others to perpetuate illegal and harmful acts, specifically child abuse, child torture, and psychological abuse, end quote. Also, reports say that, quote, the 112-page lawsuit says the two women encouraged members to purchase expensive services and products to gain control over them and benefit financially, listing prices for leadership training programs at almost $5,000 and $15,000 and multiple monthly subscriptions for $84 a month.
It
The
sounds like
lawsuit claims,
Nexium.
yeah, it does. Yeah. And it says the lawsuit claims that Connections was designed to brainwash individuals into paying for services that would ultimately cause them pain, bringing them under the company's financial and psychological control.
It's a
End quote.
cult. Told you.
Yeah,
First
yeah,
thing I
that's like
heard.
Nexium, right? It was like everything is your fault, and it's like how you feel about things is like how you control the world, kind of thing. Yeah,
Yeah, and it was the same for the leader of Nexium, Keith Raniere, talking about taking accountability. But when it came time for him to take accountability for his actions, oh, it's always someone else's fault. It's someone else did this, or I'm being targeted by the law enforcement or the system, whatever. So just funny how that changes. So they don't really practice what they preach at all. So, but this was kind of like a cult in its
the
early
making.
stage. Like had they not
Yeah.
been arrested, like I think I actually looked, their Instagram account is still up for connections. It has like 1,900 followers or something. And the last post on it was like August 28th or something, like 2 days before the August 28th, 2023. So 2 days before the arrest, that was the last post. And it's cringe if you look it up, but it is like very clearly they're trying to sell you some type of subscription, some type of service. So these are the new allegations and these are the lawsuits. So they both are being sued for a lot of money for this racketeering. So, if Ruby ends up getting out after 4 years or whatever, she doesn't spend the maximum and she gets out, she could still be facing lawsuits and having to pay all this money for these racketeering. Those are the allegations anyway. Obviously that hasn't been proven in court, but those are just what the charges
Where
are.
are her kids now? Are they with their father?
Yeah, well, I mean, some of them, like Sherry, she is an adult, so lives on her own. But obviously the younger ones, like the ABC special that I watched, said that at that time he was fighting to get them back from the state because they were in the custody of the state. And then I looked it up online. I was searching, like, did he actually get them back? But there was nothing that I could see that said he did or he didn't. So I don't really know with that. But that was a year. I don't really know how long that process takes. That was only a little over a year ago. So maybe it's still in process. But obviously the older ones that are the adults are obviously on their own. But yeah. So I don't know. It's pretty crazy, and it's like good thing that they got arrested when they did. I mean, sucks they didn't get arrested earlier, but they got arrested when they did, because if they hadn't, like, who knows, this cult could have grew and grew, and it could have been like a much bigger thing, and more people could have been roped in
Well,
to
yeah,
that.
when you think like
So-
that kid that escaped and got this neighbor to call the cops, like you think about it, he like could have saved a lot of people from going through that same thing. So, it's really like kudos to him for standing up and like exposing the whole thing, because it really was his doing that brought all this down. So good for him.
Yeah, and he just took the chance to escape. Must have had, like, he obviously had the wherewithal in that moment to do it, and saw an opportunity and took it. And yeah, it really led to all of this. So I really hope that both women they get the maximum sentence of 30 years. But if they don't and they're out, I really hope the children are safe from them, or at least can get
Yeah,
a
I don't think
restraining order
they
from
will.
court.
Stuff's muted, but what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, I don't think they'll get that maximum, because I was like, somebody else, I was watching like another podcast, and they were talking about how like they kind of determine what sentences you'll get, and they don't have any like priors and stuff like that. So he's saying that it's likely they'll get like 18 months per charge. So
Yeah, so there's 4 charges. So what's 18? I don't know. That's like 70
is
some
that like 5.5 years or 5 years?
72 months. Yeah, 5 years or something. So yeah, and they
Yeah.
were arrested in 2023. So that's like 2028 or something, 2029. So yeah, probably won't get the full maximum, which is annoying. But
They
yeah,
should
it's really,
though, because
well,
I know.
yeah.
I feel like 5 years isn't enough.
no.
And also because, like, we see other, like in the Turpin case, like they got a life sentence, those 2 parents. And that was, I mean, like, different, it's obviously different and maybe more intense. I don't know. It's hard to like say what's more intense than not. Like, abuse is abuse at the end of the day. So it doesn't really matter. But yeah. And obviously the Hart family, the case that we did a couple seasons ago, like that one ended in tragedy and they all died. So yeah. So I don't know. It's just crazy. And to me, it kind of, it's like the unraveling of this picture perfect YouTube family. It's kind of like seen as like a cautionary tale, like, that everything that you see online is like a very curated persona, and it's not always going to be exactly what it looks like. And
Yeah, you
I
never know
think,
what's going on behind the scenes. It's just like these like
Mhm.
these videos are like very edited and like everyone's having a good time, but you don't know like what led up to that or what's gonna happen once the camera shuts off, right? So I think about these other because there's other like so many YouTubers, some of those like parents with their kids like doing all these crazy fun things, but it's like, is that what their life is really like when the camera shuts off? Like, yeah, I always think about that.
Yeah, and it's like it's yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I always think, I mean, this is just my opinion, obviously, but I kind of say that YouTube family YouTube accounts are just cringe. Like at the very least, they're cringe, but at the very worst, like I think it's kind of child abuse in itself. Like taking your like 10-year-old child and putting them online. Like to me, that seems. I mean, a child can't consent to that. You know, they can't consent till they're like 18 or 20 something, right? Like I don't think you should be putting a child through that, and especially if
Well,
you have a
yeah,
very
yeah.
large
They don't know
following.
the implications, like, the long term, right? Like, it seems fun for them, they're spending time with their, like, parents, making these fun videos, doing fun things, but then, yeah, they don't really realize what's, like, going on. Like, the whole world can see that kinda thing. And then also it's fun at
Yeah,
first, but then it's like when that takes over your whole life, like, how long must it take for, like, to get these YouTube videos perfect? Like, hours a day for the kids, like, "Oh, no, redo that." Like, parents are like, "Oh, do that again," kinda thing. And that turns out not to be fun, but it's just like, now they're in it, so yeah.
and they're like presenting it as like a candid look into our lives when it's really not candid. It's very curated. Like it's probably edited multiple times over, and yeah, I also think too, like the internet, the social media and the internet is like dangerous just in general for everyone. So I can't imagine like if you have a 10 or 11-year-old on videos, like especially if you have like 2 million followers. I don't know. It's just creepy and weird, and I just think it's kind of irresponsible for people to subject their children to that. So I always cringe when it's
Yeah,
YouTube.
and, like, people know where you live, like, especially, like, Ruby was saying she thinks, "Oh, people are just mad at me, so they're sending like, the cops to my house." It's like, well, they all like, her YouTube followers obviously knew where she lived, like, that kinda thing would, like, scare me so much for, like, all these people to know where I actually live and my kids live, so, yeah, it's dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, although maybe the followers didn't know where she lived. Like maybe they just reported her name, and the police were able to find her, like where she lived. So maybe they
Yeah,
didn't know.
maybe, and
But
she's just saying that
it's
they called the cops on her, but
yeah, it's just yeah. Like I always kind of cringe. So anytime, I don't know. I think maybe if you are out there and you're considering starting a YouTube family channel or family YouTube channel, like maybe just wait until your kids are adults, or just have you don't have to have your kids in there. Because what purpose does that? I don't know. Momfluencers are just cringe. Like if I see those like channels, like
YouTube people who call themselves YouTube influencers and that's their job to cringe me. They're just cringe anyways. I hate every single one of them.
well, I think it depends on what you're doing. Like I follow some YouTubers who like I listen to like political channels and stuff, so they like actually provide news or like politics news. The people who are like just so self-obsessed and give like apartment tours and think that everyone cares about what they ate for lunch or like what they're doing in the afternoon, like no one
oh, yeah,
cares
it's
about
like,
that.
"Look at my giant house that I got now, and look at all the cars that I bought because, my YouTube channel," like, that's super obnoxious. But, like, I've
Yeah.
seen YouTube channels where it's just, like, people like, there's one really popular one where she just does, like, crafts and she, like, paints stuff and stuff like that, and, like, that's fine. She's, like,
But like yeah,
doing crafts and
Olivia,
painting stuff for the kids and yeah.
Olivia watches a family. It's called Madison and Trinity, and they do funny things. They do funny pranks and stuff. So
Is that
that's fine.
the one where the dad is in it? It's, like, crazy he does, like, crazy stuff.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah,
Olivia,
that
like,
one.
she laughs, she cracks up every time she watches it. She's like, I can hear her in the background
Yeah,
laughing.
that's the one I'm thinking of when I'm talking about this. I'm like, because the father's always in it doing stuff with his kids and like he's just doing stuff on his
Yeah,
own. It's just like I don't know. Are the kids like really loving this still or cuz I'm annoyed
Yeah,
instantly.
but there's also
yeah.
stuff like okay, like I don't care about your apartment. I don't care what you ate for lunch. I don't care what your makeup looks like. Like, who cares? Nobody.
But the thing is though, people do care. Like that's the problem is that these people they obviously have thousands or millions of subscribers. People obviously care. We don't, and a lot of people. I mean, the majority of people don't care, but obviously their subscribers care. So I think uh, until literally no one cares, they're always going to do that. But I think, yeah, I think there's a difference. Like Katie said, if someone has like does crafts or like paints, if you have like some type of skill that you're just sharing and like you're sharing like your, I don't know, it's like some people are just, I don't know. I just don't think like showing your apartment and showing your makeup routine is like a skill set. Like I think it's just narcissistic and being full of yourself. Like there's a difference. I don't know. So I'm not saying all
Yeah.
influencers are cringe.
No, I'm, like, fine. Yeah, you go on there, do your makeup, whatever. But like, that shouldn't be your life goal is to like do makeup videos, and that's like how you're gonna make millions. Like, I feel like do something that's like productive and good, and this can be like your hobby or like a side thing. But it shouldn't be like your
Yeah.
full life goal to be a YouTube influencer, but not actually do anything substantial. That's what
Yeah.
bothers me. It's like I'm just gonna go like run around my neighborhood and be obnoxious, and that's gonna be my career. Like, no.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Like, because there are also people that I don't really follow influencers. Like I said, I listen to like they started out as sort of influence because they were commenting on like politics or like news or whatever, and then their channel got popular. And now they're like on actual like shows and stuff, or they have their own show. But um, so I think that's fine. But like they all started out, most of them with other actual jobs, and that was just like what their hobby was, and they just had opinions and they wanted to share them, whatever they do. But yeah, like if it's a hobby, fine. Like that's fine. Like right now,
This
this
is a
podcast
hobby
is
for
our
us.
hobby.
We
This
don't
is
make
our
any money.
hobby. No, this is our hobby. But
Yeah.
I'm not saying if it blew up and tomorrow we were rich and famous, I'd love it. No, I'm kidding. But I don't know. I'm just kidding. I don't know. I just feel like just add something of value. I don't know. I just think having makeup channel, I'm not sure life goal is to share your apartment tour and share you going to like the mall for shopping or something. It's not
Yeah, like that kind of
adding anything
I
to the
even
world.
like I'm on the fence about like makeup tutorials. Like, I mean, whatever. Like that's some people's careers. Like they're cosmetologists, right? They do makeup for a living and they do hair and nails, and like that's fine. But like, yeah, don't have that being your life goal is to make videos of you doing your own makeup. Like that, it's fine. It's a hobby. You're good at it. Maybe you like it, but I don't know. Just whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, it's annoying. So I always just say be very cautious if you follow any YouTube momfluencers or any YouTube channels with their kids in them. Like I just think it's exploitative. And not even just for influencers. Like I think like famous people who show their kids or have their kids have their own accounts or like have their kids be famous when they're younger. I don't know. I just think it's a little bit obnoxious and also problematic. So that's just my 2 cents. But yeah, so overall just don't do that, or just be cautious, I guess, if you follow any influencer accounts that are like family. I don't know, that's just a little bit cringe. But anyway, so also was going to say that the oldest daughter, Sherry Frankie, so she did write a book. It's called The House of My Mother, A Daughter's Quest for Freedom. So I haven't read it yet, but I'm sure that kind of goes more into like when I was doing this case, I didn't go into like the specifics, the super details of like all of the abuse and stuff. I didn't feel like it was really necessary for the story, but yeah, I'm sure that book has a lot of it in there. If you can there's lots of YouTube videos and stuff out there that will do deep dives on that. So if you want to do that, if you want to know more details about that, for sure, go ahead and take a listen to other podcasts or read Sherry's book, because I do plan to read the book also. But yeah, just overall crazy case and pretty sad. I mean, glad that they were eventually arrested, but I think it was a little bit too late. Many people say it was too late because there were complaints for years leading up to that. So just crazy to think. So yeah, that does it for this episode of the show. You can follow us on all the social medias, Crime Family Podcast on Facebook, Crime Family Podcast on Instagram, Crime Family Pod 1 on X, but we hate X, so maybe we'll delete our account. We haven't yet, but we might. We don't really post on there anyway, but if you want to, I guess, if you see our account on there, I guess you can follow it.
No, we're gonna
And
get rid
you
of it.
can, yeah, I probably should have already. I don't know, I didn't, but haven't yet. And yeah, you can email us at crimefamilypodcast@gmail.com, and we'll put the links to all this stuff in the show notes. And as always, we will be back next week with a brand new episode, a brand new case to talk about. So thank you so much. Until then, take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.